Post CAT, at that time, I had no idea if I would even clear the cutoff for DILR. I was unsure of how well I had performed. Instead, I decided to turn my focus to all the other exams that I had. IFT preparation, I started it in full-fledged form after CAT. The thing with IFT was that since it allowed me to switch between sections, I would keep switching at every 10 to 12 seconds between the sections. The math section had a couple of questions that were the same as CAT, just the figures were different. So as long as you have seen the solutions which appear like almost immediately after CAT is, I think you'll be sorted for IFT as well. Hi, I'm Pushti Shah, and I'll be joining the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, Delhi campus, and I'll be joining it for the MBA in IB program, batch of 25. I scored 130 on the IFT exam that fetched me a percentile of 99.63. Apart from IFT, I appeared for NMAT. I scored 957 on that exam. I appeared for CAT, wherein I scored 98.38 percentile, and I also appeared for ZAT. The way the exams have been lined up in the exam season is that we kick off with CAT, that happens on the last weekend of November. Post that, at a week's interval, we have MyCAT session 1. We have 3 different slots for SNAP. In the middle of the SNAP schedule, we also have IFT, and ZAT occurs at the end, which is in the first or the second week of January. So of all my converts, that is, I am Udaipur, Trichy, Ranchi, Rohtak, Amritsar, and MIMS Mumbai. I decided to go ahead with IFT Delhi. My background is actually in biotechnology, but I do have an entrepreneurial experience in import and selling of journaling and luxury supplies from Malaysia and the Philippines. So international business was one thing that I think would have worked well for me, and foreign trade, it's an exemplary course at IFT. And since it has a 60-year-old rich legacy and a good alumni network, I decided to opt for an old school rather than one of the new IIMs. Post CAT, although I did end up with a percentile of 98.38, at that time I had no idea if I would even clear the cutoff for DILR. I was unsure of how well I had performed. Instead, I decided to turn my focus to all the other exams that I had, so it was a make or break situation for me. Since you barely have a couple of weeks in hand and you need to pivot from an exam that has constraints for every subject to an exam that gives you the freedom to flit between sections. So when it came to deciding my strategy for IFT, I decided to take multiple mocks to ensure that I was not oversaturated. I would take them at intervals of 2 to 3 days, and every time that I attempted a mock paper, I would change the order of the subjects that I attempted. Like most non-engineers, quant was not my strong suit, so I decided to start with verbal and GK. When it comes to this entire duration of November to January, you need to really, adapt on how you can change your strategies, how you need to determine what your strong sections are. And if you're weak at a section, you need to know what at least minimum number of questions you need to attempt in order to ensure that you comfortably clear the cutoff. IFT preparation, I started it in full-fledged form after CAT. I took 2 to 3 days after CAT to rejuvenate myself, and then I began the process for IFT. IFT also had the extra section of GK, so I had to ensure that I kept up with the news daily. There's no slacking when it comes to keeping up with the current affairs. The thing with IFT was that since it allowed me to switch between sections, I would keep switching at every 10 to 12 seconds between the sections. Since I was not really well versed with GK, I took that section first. Like, there are 15 questions for GK, so you either know the question or you don't. The answer is not going to come back to you later, it's not going to take time to solve, so I just attempted those 15 questions in one go, and then I set that section aside. The next for me was verbal. So there were a lot of questions in IFT that were just vocabulary questions, no sentences, no context, so either you know the words or you don't. So these are the questions that will save you time and give you ample of time to attempt your weaker section. So those are the ones that I attempted first. After that, there was a crossword puzzle that had been there for the verbal section. So when it comes to verbal, it is not about knowing the right answer, it's about knowing how to eliminate the wrong answers. So I attempted the questions that could be solved quickly, and I left RC for the end. I have a good reading lightning speed, so I decided to attempt it at the end. Post that, I decided to do logical reasoning. DILR sets were actually pretty easy to crack as if you are quick with your calculations, so there was nothing that required intense solving. So that is the next section that I chose, and the math section had a couple of questions that were the same as CAT, just the figures were different. So as long as you have seen the solutions which appear like almost immediately after CAT is, I think you'll be sorted for IFT as well. And it honestly depends on how well you think you're doing. Even if your particular section is holding you back, do not be stuck, or do not take it upon yourself to solve that section first. It's all right to switch to a different section that might end up being easy for you. So all I'd say is, do not go with a set mindset. Just attempt the best you can, adapt to the situation, what the paper throws at you. And I had my mentor tell me that, it's not over until it's over. So that is one advice that I'd give to every aspirant. So IFT gives you the freedom to switch between sections. So if you're on a roll when it comes to solving, it is easy to lose track of time. It is important that you keep an eye on the timer and give equal importance to each of the sections. There's a sectional cutoff that you need to clear. And one important thing is that while you go in with the mindset that there are a minimum number of questions that I need to solve in each section, you also need to be adaptable. If you find your weak subject to be easier to solve, that means it's easy for everyone else. The cutoff could go much higher. So you need to adapt with the difficulty and ensure that you know how to manage your time well. So I think that is one test that they throw upon you as one of your managerial aspects. When it comes to preparing for the GDPI for B schools, every B school, like its written test, tends to have its USP, something that you need to adapt with, and something that you need to be focused on. For example, all my interviews that I had for the IMs, most of them focused on knowing me as a person and the general headlines and current affairs. But when it came to IFT, we had, so my coaching classes, we had a separate session on trade laws and basics on foreign trade. So that is something that is unique to IFT, and it has been known to be very heavy when it comes to current affairs and GK. Even the transcripts that I read for IFT, they were very GK oriented, and that is actually one of my weaker sections. My experience actually, however, was very different. As someone from a biotechnology background, it's an arcane field. I rarely tend to get academic questions, and I have a year's worth of gap, so there's no WorkX. So there's nothing to talk about that as well. So if the interview had to pivot to anything, it would be GK. But one thing that I'd advise to all freshers or people without WorkX or people who are changing their field, it really helps if you have some domain knowledge. They do not expect you to have any practical knowledge or any anecdotes that you could, share. So one thing that helped me was watching case studies. Think School has been very beneficial when it comes to that. I think IIM Rohtak and IFT were the only ones that had an extempore in my lineup, and since the budget was also declared of late, we had questions on that as well. So being well versed with the recent topics as well as knowing some case studies could really help you crack the interview. The thing with IFT was that the interview scheduled on Microsoft Teams, and my Teams app, for reasons unknown, it crashed 2 minutes before my interview was about to begin. We'd been given the slot, and my PC crashed as well, and there was no hope in sight. I had no idea what to do, and we'd strictly been told to join in through a PC or a laptop. The important thing then is to calm yourself down and focus on what's important. So the mail that we'd been sent enlisting all our PI details had the number of a student coordinator. So I immediately called them up and I asked them that I know it's time for me to appear in front of the panel, but I have technical issues. There's really nothing I can do. So they said, it's fine, just take your time and log in when it's done. So I actually logged into my interview 5 minutes late, and that was like 1/3 of my interview done right there. And I was nervous. I was obviously shaken up, and the faculty, to their credit, did their best to make me feel at ease. I was also profusely apologizing once the interview was done, but they were very gracious about it, and for that I'm thankful that it did not impact my interview. For the extempore topic, they had given me my first topic. You can opt to switch your first topic, if you're uncomfortable, but it's preferable if you go with the first one. That is where I messed up as well. The first topic that I'd been given was policy changes that you'd recommend to ensure that there is a creation of jobs in the rural market. My brain froze. I had no idea what I could talk about, and it was a 3-minute long extempore, so that's a lot to talk about when you don't know anything about the topic. So I requested for a topic change, and my next topic was that, do you think privatization helps when it comes to public sectors? This was right at the heels of Air India being acquired by Tata. So I spoke a bit about that. So I spoke about ITC's e-Choupal initiative as well, and since I'd also mentioned that I wanted to make a career in FMCG for marketing, that was my follow-up question. They asked me, what do you think of ITC's e-Choupal initiative? How do you think that helped, and why do you think it is an exemplary form of logistics management, and how you are ensuring that there is profit creation in places where people thought it was impossible? One important thing I think that helped me was, if I did not know, I'd just admit to it that I'm really sorry. Instead of giving half-baked opinions, I'd rather like to opt for a change, because I'm not very well aware of this situation. So they would usually laugh at that, and it would set a very friendly atmosphere. It was not in a derogatory sense. They were very gracious about that. They did ask me extensively about my entrepreneurial experience, especially since it was import and export related. So when the convert came through, my legs were shaking. Like, I had no idea. I had already started my preparations. I was supposed to join IIM Udaipur in 2 weeks' time, and this was one convert that I hadn't banked on anyway. So it was an extreme. I'm not even sure I'd call it a surprise. It was a legit shock. So that's what happened. And I also had my mentors call in, saying that now you know where you finally want to go. It's a no-brainer. You're going to have to switch to IFT, and it suits your profile as well. So that is also, I think, one thing I learned during the journey, and especially when this convert came through, is that if you're a square and a college is looking for a triangle, it's not your fault. It's not a commentary of you as a person or your caliber. If you fit, you fit. The college best suited for you will eventually find its way to you. I had taken up the entire preparatory course at IMS. So IMS also provided us with a GK compendium that was updated every week with all the major news headlines, and there were quizzes where you could test yourself on the compendium as well. So that is one resource that I heavily banked on. In terms of mocks, since there was very little time, I only decided to appear for past year papers. That is what gives you a best idea on what the actual exam will be like. Apart from that, I'd also recommend reading, or at least having some hobby, developing something that lets you show an aspect of your personality that sets you apart from everyone else. And if you're particularly targeting IFT, then I'd also recommend being well versed with a few common trade laws and what are India's trade relations with other countries. So I had one advice from one of my mentors. I usually got an advice that I talk too fast, and you should not let your panic show through. Even if they throw a question at you, you should know how to stall and slow down. So that was one advice that I'd give, that be a duck, paddle furiously under the surface and stay calm on the top.